Great, thank you. It's wonderful to be with educators who care about the intersection of learning and technology, because that's going to shape the future. Whether we're able to get this right or not will determine whether we have a glorious 21st century or a period of unmitigated risks. The walls are coming down everywhere, and it's difficult to not think about this, being so close to it here in Berlin, 25 years ago, these walls coming down. But it's not just about physical walls coming down. It's about mental walls. It's about financial walls. It's about technological walls. All the walls are coming down. And it's that which makes this the most exciting century in the history of humanity. It changes all of our lives in surprising ways. And it's certainly changed mine. I was living in Paris when this wall came down. I didn't imagine that it would touch me personally. I thought it was about Eastern Europe, about the Cold War, about something else. And within 6 months, much to my surprise, I was invited to have dinner with President Mandela in Paris. He wasn't president then. He'd just been released from prison. But he was released because the Cold War ended. And the defining feature of this period we live in, our lives, is that what happens elsewhere will dramatically affect us in new ways. It's this change that results from the walls coming down. And it's this change that will shape education going forward and technological progress. And of course, the other fundamental period in this time is technology. Technology which got off the ground at the same time as the Berlin Wall came down. Over 25 years, this exponential growth in virtual connectivity. And now we have a world of 5 billion literate, educated people, whereas we had a world only 30 years ago of well less than 1 billion connected people. 4 billion more literate, connected people in the world. And this is the engine of change. Whether people are in the slums of Mumbai, Soweto, Sao Paulo, or in apartments in Berlin, they will contribute to change in surprising new ways. And they're coming together. There's a release of individual genius. If you believe in the random distribution of exceptional capabilities, which I do, there's just more people out there, educated, connected, giving, learning. But I also believe in collective genius, the capabilities of people coming together to form teams, to learn from each other, through the methods that we heard about this morning, and in other ways. So new cures for cancer being developed on 24-hour cycles around the world. My lab in Oxford, doing this with people in Beijing, and San Francisco, and Palo Alto, and all over, in real time. There's no sleep on innovation anymore. And that's the power, the engine, which brings change. So if you think you've seen a lot of change, be ready for much more surprise. This is the slowest time in history you will know. It's going to get faster, the pace of change greater, the surprises more intense. It's always going to be more and more difficult to predict what's next. Uncertainty will grow because the pace of change is growing. Because the walls have come down, there are 2 billion more people in the world since 1990. And that's because ideas have traveled. Simple ideas, like washing your hands prevents contagious diseases. Really complicated ideas, like those embedded in vaccines, in new cures for cancer, and many other things. 2 billion more people coming together, most of them now urbanized, and even those that aren't physically together, virtually together. A quite extraordinary moment in human history, one where we've come together as a community, like we were 150,000 years ago when we lived in villages together, our ancestors in East Africa, and then dispersed around the world, and now reconnected. And it's this reconnection which I believe gives us the potential. But do we learn from it? And are we able to think of ourselves in new ways because we're connecting in new ways? Is this wall coming down changing the way we are and we think? Or do we still think like individualists in our nation states, pursuing our own self-interests and those of our countries, not realizing that now we're in a different game. Now we're in a game in which we have to cooperate, where we have to think about others, where our actions for the first time spill over in dramatic new ways and affect people on the other side of the planet. This pace of education means that not only are we liberating ourselves, but we're liberating people from all sorts of past habits. And this change is leading to quick changes in social norms. Acceptance of gay marriage is one of those, but there'll be many, many, many others. And so what we think about as normal today will seem very strange in a few years' time. This pace of change driven by education. More doctorates being created in China now than the rest of the world put together every year. More scientists alive today than all the scientists that ever lived in history. More literate people alive today than all the literate people that ever lived in history. This is the engine of change. But it's not simply about more and more progress. It's not simply that we know that this is going to get better and better. It's about what's next. We don't know what the future holds. We live in this extraordinary moment of our lives where we've seen exponential growth in incomes. That's red. And we've seen this most rapid increase in populations, and income growth even more rapid than population growth, which is why people have escaped poverty at a pace that has never happened in history. Despite the world's population increasing by 2 billion over the last 25 years, the number of desperately poor people has gone down by about 300 million. This has never happened before. This is an incredible time, by far the best time to be alive. Just while you're here, your average life expectancy should increase by about 10 hours. That's the pace of progress. What you're learning and what's happening in the labs. And it's that which makes me incredibly optimistic. This is the age of discovery. This is the new Renaissance. This is a period of creativity and technological change which hasn't been seen for 500 years. This is from my stem cell lab in the Oxford Martin School. The lab technician's skin turned into a heart cell. And it's just one of the extraordinary things that's happening that makes one so excited about the future. A future of rising life expectancy. So children being born today in Berlin or elsewhere in Europe, life expectancies well over 100. And not having to worry about the things that I worry about, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia. But what skills are they learning today that will help them shape this future, prepare for it, and will still be relevant in 100 years' time? It's those skills that you have the responsibility to help shape. We can imagine this glorious future, an extraordinary time in human history. But we can also realize that it could come very, very badly unstuck. I looked to the Renaissance for inspiration, to try and understand how people interpreted these choices. That was a period of creative exceptionalism, scientific exceptionalism. And we think today of the iconic figures, the Michelangelos, the Da Vincis, the Copernicuses, discovering the earth went round the sun, not the other way around. Fundamentally changing our understanding of ourselves and the universe in ways that will happen in our lifetimes. Fundamental changes which led to humanism, enlightenment, and many, many other things. Spurred by technologies. Then it was the Gutenberg press. Simple ideas traveled very rapidly. Until then, only monks could read and write in Latin, in their monasteries. Less than 0.5% of the world was literate. There was nothing to read, and it was in Latin. And then this invention led to a whole new way of thinking. Ideas traveled, people could learn in their own languages, and we had the Renaissance. We also had the development of nationalism, because people could identify, and of course, massive technological pushback. The bonfire of the vanities, the burning of books, not far from here, and across Europe. Destruction of presses, religious fundamentalism, extremism, religious wars for 150 years. And I don't know if you recall those curves I put up of the long trajectory of income growth and population growth, but the Renaissance did not figure. It was a non-event. It led to no improvements in people's welfare in Europe or beyond. Are we different? Can we embrace our technologies in ways that lead to sustained progress? And there are two things I worry about in this respect. First, while the walls have gone down between societies, within societies, the walls are going up everywhere. All countries are experiencing rising inequality. Why is this? It's because the pace of progress is so fast at the frontier that this process of integration, some call it globalization, has led to such rapid change that if you aren't on the frontier, if you don't have the skills, the mobility, the attitude to change, to adapt, to grab new things, you're left further and further behind. If you're in the wrong place with the wrong skills at the wrong time, or you're too old, you're left further and further behind. And so we see in all societies rising inequality. And some people have been able to capture the goods of globalization. They've been able to park their money, whether they're a corporation in Bermuda or somewhere, or an individual in Monaco or Liechtenstein or Luxembourg. And so governments are becoming less and less able to tax their citizens and tax their corporates, and less able to fund education, health, infrastructure, and the other things we need. And the second big problem of this integration process is when things connect, unfortunately, not only good stuff connects, rarely bad stuff connects too. And so the question is, how do we have this complex, dense, intertwined system without becoming overwhelmed by it? Are we able to manage our interdependencies in ways that will be sustained and benefit us, or will they overwhelm us? And this is both the intended consequences, which lead to unintended bads. Our intended consequence of using more antibiotics around the world, leading to antibiotic resistance. Or as our energy growth grows around the world because people are escaping poverty, leading to climate change. Or as our resource use increases because people are consuming more food, leading to resource depletion. And the unintended consequences. Banks which spread around the globe, becoming centers of cascading risk and financial crisis. Airports spreading pandemics, what I call the butterfly defect of globalization. The spreading of risk is not a new idea. We think in England that a rat coming off a ship in Liverpool might have killed half the British population in the Black Death, early globalization leading to systemic risk. But what's new is the pace and scale of the change. So the swine flu that starts in Mexico City in 160 countries in 30 days. And the emerging infections group in the Oxford Martin School has modeled the spread of this with airline traffic and shown it exactly replicated. So the super spreaders of the goods of globalization, like JFK, Heathrow, Frankfurt, and other great airports, become the super spreaders of the bads, in this case, pandemics. And in the cybersphere, of course, we see this dramatically, that anything can be instantaneously elsewhere, be it good or be it bad. In finance, we've seen a dramatic indication of this collapsing system, starting from a subprime crisis in the US, leading to 100 million people laid off from work around the world. So what happens somewhere dramatically affecting people on the other side of the world, in the same way that my life was shaped, but sometimes with disastrous consequences. And what the financial system also teaches us is the rising power of individuals. These new technologies give individuals simply unprecedented powers. Barings Bank had existed for 200 years. It had withstood the most amazing technological, political, and other changes. And one young man, Nick Leeson, having some fun, a bit of trading, managed to bring it down. And the same thing almost happened in Société Générale with Jerome Geervil, JP Morgan, UBS, and many others. We see that these individuals now have power in new ways. And of course, individuals can also, in new ways, develop biopathogens. Using a DNA sequencing, which is going down exponentially in price, a single individual now can build something using a technology like a drone to distribute it and kill perhaps tens, if not hundreds of millions of people. This new capability, this new power of individuals has changed so that nation states are becoming less and less powerful relative to the power of individuals. And there's 7 billion of us growing to 9 billion over the next 35 years. Within the cybersphere, we see this dramatically, how small groups can cause mayhem. steal all our records, open our bank accounts, they'll be opening our front door locks, controlling our vehicle-to-vehicle communication, etc. Understanding how we build systems which liberate us, and yet we do not become slaves or vulnerable to, is the central question. Can we create interdependent systems where we are in control? And what does that mean? And that education process requires a new understanding of responsibility. As these technologies pervade into our bodies, on our bodies, and everything we do, it becomes more and more important. Trust, integrity, judgment. These old things become more and more important. The financial crisis was characterized by a number of remarkable things. Over 250,000 extremely well-paid people in the central banks of the world, in the IMF, in other institutions, with this enormous amount of data, do not see it coming. Too much data, too little integrity. And as machines begin to take our jobs, and one of my groups in the Oxford Martin School has said that 47% of US jobs will be lost to machine intelligence over the next 20 years, people will increasingly see machine intelligence as a threat not only to their bank accounts and other systems, but to their jobs and to their careers. And so how do we create education systems where we are not vulnerable to automation taking our jobs? And the answer is we need to do things which are not automatable. What does that mean? It means creativity, dexterity, empathy, judgment. And that's what will keep us different from machines for at least the next 50 years. So creating an environment where machines complement our abilities, help us, do many of the things that are really, in many ways, inhumane for people to be doing, dangerous, and others. Help us be more effective, but don't supplant us. Being in Germany, we're reminded always that it's not that technologies exist that people decide to adopt them. It's society's attitude. Germany has banned nuclear power. It's banned GMOs. Many other places embrace these technologies. It's what we feel about these technologies that matters. It's how we feel we can control them, whether we feel that we're on top, which will shape the way that societies adopt them. And so in education systems, it's absolutely vital that we understand them. People need to understand what genetic modification is. People need to understand what DNA sequencing is. People need to understand these new, extremely powerful technologies, which will change the way we are and the choices we face going forward. There will be societal choices. Do we want to create superhumans or not? And if others do it, what is our attitude to that? These are choices that we will face, let alone the next generation. So this handshake, this understanding of technology, the literacy becomes more and more important, as well as the interconnectivity. As we all become wealthier, as we will become more connected, the spillovers of our choices get stronger and stronger. And we see this in many, many areas. We see, sorry, I just want to go back to the slide before with the video, if I may. This is the tuna market in Tokyo. This tuna was sold for about 1.5 million euro. This is the market's response to the scarcity of a natural resource. The price goes up. The tuna don't know how much they're worth. Of course, they don't reproduce more when they're worth more. High-tech fishermen go and chase the remaining tuna, and you get extinction. And the same thing, of course, with rhino and any natural resource. Natural resources don't understand markets. They are irrelevant to them. And so as we go forward and we have a market system which determines choice on the one hand, and more people with more wealth are claiming resources through this system, and on the other hand we have the supply of natural resources determined in totally different ways, we have a very serious problem of extinction. Governments are not very smart at this either. Thinking short-term, They extract resource, often for the good of their people, but collectively in the long term, a disaster. This is the Aral Sea. Countries, 6 countries doing the right thing, drawing water to feed their people, collectively a disaster. The examples of success, and the Mediterranean is one, where citizens, scientists, politicians, civil society movements came together and saved this. And with climate change, of course, we have this dramatic problem. What's happening in Paris this week is of huge significance to the future of the planet. But it's not enough. We need to do much more. And we need to do it in a way that allows people around the world to benefit from the things that we have. We've created 90% of the problem in the rich countries, but 80%, already 70% of the flows, growing to 80 over the next 15 years, will be coming from emerging markets. So how do we let the rest of the world climb the energy curve while ensuring we keep global warming to below 2 degrees? These collective decisions increasingly will shape the way that the planet moves. Who's going to do this? This set of institutions is totally unfit for purpose. It was built in a different era, with different power structures. It is unable to meet the challenges of our time. And in some areas, like cyber, there's no institution at all. Small changes, largely rearranging the furniture. So I think of us as nations, like in a cabin within a big ocean liner, each in our little cabin, drifting with no captain on planet Earth's deck. Again, part of this is the result of extraordinary positive changes. We're no longer in a world where 12 white men smoking cigars could sit in a room and decide the Earth's future, as they did after the Second World War. New power balances mean we have to have a transition in power. But we're in this dangerous time where the old powers no longer rule and the new powers have not been able to step up to the plate. So it's a time of transition. It's a time where the big institutions, the best of them, like the IMF, have proved themselves totally unfit for purpose. It requires citizens, it requires thinking in new ways to overcome this problem. Thinking which overcomes short-termism, being it in business or being it in our own decisions. We need to think long because we're here for the long term, and the kids of today will be here for at least the next century. How we do this, and how we realize that our own decisions increasingly are entangled with others, is of course the critical question. What we see in the politics is a reversal. People feel the future is scary, uncertain. They feel that openness and connectivity makes them more vulnerable, and they're right. And so we see this political revulsion. We see extremism growing in all countries, but certainly in Europe and in the US. People wanting to return to an age which they romanticize as being better. Protectionist, nationalist, xenophobic. It's profoundly misguided. In order to ensure that we can manage this world, we need to be more connected, not less. We need to ensure that we're able to come together, but be protected. Resilient, thinking together and ensuring that through our decisions, we not only protect our own futures, but protect those of others and the planet. Thank you. So if we can do all of that, we can rock on to a happy old age.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. I've got a lot of comments here, but there's one theme which is emerging. Let me just give you this one comment from Anastasia Brewer, I think it was. It's just nipped out as... I want to pick up actually really on what David said right at the beginning about don't be afraid, don't be in denial, and this need for change, and what you said about the new normal will feel very strange in a few years' time, because Jeff Kortenbosch makes this comment: our key skill set should be about adapting to rapid change, to learn, unlearn and relearn. And the debate tonight is going to be about 21st century skills are not being taught in schools and should be. Now, much of the work in the Martin School is about behaviour. and about understanding how the brain works, and adaptability and the fears of the certain generations to be able to adapt to this new shift, which is accelerating probably even faster than most realize. How optimistic can we be that actually our human capacity can cope with this?
Yeah, this is the most difficult question. My sense is that the world is moving at a revolutionary speed, and we and our institutions are evolutionary, very slow adapters. My hope is that this concentration of knowledge, which is being unleashed through the new connectivity and literacy, will allow us to leapfrog. And we do see that, and we see signs of this in so many ways. So there's all sorts of exciting things, like the things we heard about earlier today, that are happening. The big question, and I think it's going to be partly a question that's resolved in Paris this week, is can we learn to cooperate on these big challenges? Are we able to give up some independence and sovereignty as individuals or as countries to ensure that collectively we all have a bigger future? Are we able to think longer term?
What about the grey matter, the ability, and we've only got 3 minutes to run now, but what about the ability of the human being to cope with this enormity, particularly to adapt to the speed that the next generation through the education process will be expecting?
Humans can do anything. In my college at Oxford Balliol, we had a third of the college giving their lives in the First World War and about 20% of the college giving their lives in the Second World War to defend ideals of freedom. People are prepared to make the most extraordinary sacrifices to change their lives fundamentally if they believe that it's the right thing to do.
Can they do it, though?
Yes, they can. We've done it before and we can do it again. I'm absolutely convinced.
But again, I'm trying to bring together a number of themes here, but what David said right at the beginning, don't be afraid, don't be in denial, that is achievable, is it? That kind of reversal with this scale of change and the shift, the acceleration taking place?
Yes. I think one has to open one's eyes before one can see what's happening around, and this pace of change is really what it's about. Are we able to appreciate this extraordinary moment in history we're in, this age of discovery? Are we able to recognize it for what it is and seize the opportunities that come with it?
Ian, I'm going to stop there. I'm afraid because you ran to about 25 minutes, so the 30 minutes is up. So I have to stop you at that point because some people have begun to leave. There's coffee and everything else and very tight schedule. Remember, though, that this is going to be part of a big debate later tonight. And also, let me underscore that everyone here can talk more about it. And indeed, David Price is signing his book, How He'll Work, Live and Learn in the Future, at 13:05. And that's in Potsdam 3, and information doesn't want to be free. Corey is going to be speaking about that on copyright in the digital age as well at 12 o'clock. So plenty. We've really burdened you with an enormous number of concepts. And David, can I tell you as well, there are a large number of people who sent messages admiring your battle and how you've won your battle on health. Can I thank you all very much indeed, and also for contributing some important comments and questions from the floor. It's coffee time.